Hi, I'm Anoushka Shankar, and you're catching me on Midday. It's always like a big spike of joy when something big like that happens. So this time was no different. I got the news and I was like really, really happy and excited. And it's only been once before that I had 2 nominations in one night. So that was like an extra joy. So it was lovely. I guess my first Grammy nomination was in 2001, so I've had a long journey with this. So I don't know if my opinions have changed, but I have a greater understanding of the industry and how things work. And, music on one side is an art form. I do this because I love it and because it speaks to my soul. And on the other side, it's a career and it's a job. And this definitely falls into that side of things. It's part of the job, right? Like getting a nomination, potentially getting a win. These are all job-related things. They're not music related things. And as such, the way the industry is carved out globally, it's tricky. So, the global music category, the new age category, they're known in a way within the industry as the hardest categories because they're not niche. If you think of alternative jazz or alt country or something like that, the people who vote within those categories are experts within that field of music. They know those artists. You're competing against your peers, who have made albums within a same sort of general world as you. Whereas global music is everything that's not from Europe and America, basically, of every kind, every culture, every time period. And there's no experts as such that can vote really with the same level of expertise across those categories. So all awards are subjective, but these become even more subjective. So it's really down to like who the voters are in those years, who are the ones who are very much within the network. All that stuff gets very, very tricky. That's a really good question, but it's a tricky answer. So you're right. These things have, again, we're back in music business. Like they have commercial value or status. If you're a Grammy nominee, that kind of affects people's subconscious when they hear about you. If you say Grammy winner, that's like another idea that sounds even more impressive. So hypothetically, winning would have some other aspect attached to it of prestige. But as someone said to me on my 8th or 9th loss, they wrote me a message and said, look, like getting nominated over, at that time, 15 years, that's a career. One potential win and then never being heard of again is a flash in the pan. Like none of this really means anything. And so to be nominated again and again out of like a whole global category of albums that exists is a huge honor. And every single time there's a 20% chance you're going to win. And I have to be really frank, other than the few artists who, like my father, like Zach, your uncle, like certain legends who kind of transcend everything. A lot of this stuff is down to who's willing to play the game, who does the networking, who shows up for the nomination brunches. Like, I'm not just talking about the Grammys. A lot of this is about that stuff. And so people who really are willing to put in that effort and make that their life, cool, but that's not for me. So my first nomination and first loss was when I was 21 years old, so I had to do a lot of work because of course I was very disappointed at that time and the second time and the third time. And, these are things that do feel disappointing. And I had to do the work psychologically to look at the fact that they don't have actual meaning, about the music or about me as a person. And so I've done that work, and now I can take it with a little bit more of a pinch of salt. That's not to say I'm not human. I'll feel happy, I'll feel disappointed, but not in that huge soul-breaking kind of way. Because ultimately, like, I feel so grateful. I get to make work that I love. I get to do a job that I love. I get to connect with artists and with audiences, and I get to do this thing like on a daily basis. That's 98% of what I do. And then these little bits of awards and nominations, that's a frill that kind of comes in and out of that process. In February, it'll be the 30-year anniversary. So there's been a long arc of progression. But in the last few years, I'd say my focus has been on removing as much of the filter between me and my music as possible, meaning getting more and more vulnerable, allowing people really into my craft or into the emotions of what makes my music, almost simplifying. A lot of the times coming with a classical tradition and learning classical music, it's very complex, it can seem very intimidating, there's a lot of weight attached to it. And actually, I'm just making melodies, I'm just making music that people can connect to emotionally without any understanding. So almost just simplifying. Even for myself, when I'm going to play, I try to come out of the habit of using the word practice and use the word play, so that that changes the attitude of how I approach my music. It's playful, it's about connection. So that kind of just creating vulnerability and closeness with my instrument and music has been a big part of my recent journey. And so has collaboration, which is not new, but I think it's one of the greatest ways to grow and learn. Working with another artist, especially from a different tradition or culture, it means you open yourself up to this whole other world and style of music making. On the whole, there's always some initial idea that's really clear. The artistic process can evolve. So sometimes where an album ends up is not exactly where my first vision was, but there has to be some emotional impetus that gets me started, that gets me digging into myself to write things. That can be internal or external. So, for example, I wrote an album called Land of Gold, which was written in response to the ongoing humanitarian refugee crisis. But the impetus of music making came from my emotional response to that. Whereas Love Letters was in the aftermath of my own divorce. So it's very personal, so it can be anything, so long as there's an honest, deep emotional well to draw from. The work I'm making right now, I've been releasing these 3 mini albums as chapters, which is a kind of new idea for me and not very common. So it's one ongoing story, but it's released across 3 releases. And that was a very clear idea I had 2 years ago. I was sitting in a cafe in Goa and I was like, I'm going to do 3 chapters. I wrote it in my journal, and I scribbled some song idea names and just had this concept that each one would have a different producer, that they would end up connecting at the end, that I was going to open myself up to a new process every time, show up to the studio with a blank slate. So that didn't change. That idea kind of stuck. But where that was going to lead me, I didn't know. That's part of the creative process I have to keep myself open to. I think 3 is such a cliche number. I mean, for some reason, it just makes sense when you do things. And for whatever reason, I had this flash of intuition that I wanted to make 3 chapters that would tell a story in 3 parts, but also kind of dig into what I consider my 3 roots in a way. So, being from India, my music being from India, but being born and living in London, growing up in California. These are all influences that I carry within me. And I just wanted to dig slightly into each of them in a focused way. So chapter 1 we made in Berlin, even though Aruj Aftab was the producer. So it kind of had the influence of like a wintry European experience in the music making. Chapter 2 was made in California, staying in a house by the Pacific Ocean. So again, that whole atmosphere crept into the music. Ironically, chapter 3 was made in London, but we literally rented out a room in an Indian restaurant, and I was working with 2 amazing artists, Alam Khan and Sarathi Korwar, and they're my collaborators. So with them, we really kind of dug into our Indian influences and made chapter 3 as an homage to that. It might be my outlet, but it's not my therapy. My therapy is my therapy. My network of people that I talk to, they're my support network. And I really lean into those things in my life. Like I've had years of growing up and having difficult experiences and learning that we need each other. We need support. We need those things. And I lean on those things. And because I do that, I have a language for my experiences. And I've also learned what it means in life when I lean on other people, and then I also have experiences I can then help other people with. Anything I go through that's difficult puts me in a place where I can help someone else because I've got something to share when they need it. Yeah. And that taught me that works. And it meant that I then started to apply that in my art, because I could translate that experience and go, okay, I have a wealth of experiences here. So let's say I've been through a divorce and I write songs about my feelings of breakup, which is not a unique thing. 95% of music is written about this stuff. But you put that stuff in there and then other people can pick it up. So they're going through something similar and they can find that in your music. So I just kind of learned to trust that experience, that the more I allow that vulnerability, so long as it feels safe for me. I have my own lines around what I choose to share and how I choose to share it. But if I put it there, it's there for other people. And then I get so much by seeing how that helps other people that it becomes a really beautiful and deeply meaningful experience. I think my process with choosing collaborations is quite parallel to maybe how people approach like dating and romance. It's the best way I can describe it. It's like an intuition or an attraction. So if I hear someone's music, sometimes I just love the music and I love listening to it. Sometimes I hear the music and I love it, but it's also like a hunger. Like there's something in that music that's pulling me. I want to get closer to it. And that is a desire to collaborate. That's a desire. I'm hearing something there that I want to be working with also, you know? And that's the person that I would usually reach out to. It's much more intuitive than conscious. I feel that hunger. I feel that recognition. Generally, I would say that doesn't lead me wrong. You know, getting to work with Herbie Hancock when I was like 21 or 22, like that was insane. Getting to sit in a studio with him and Wayne Shorter and Chaka Khan, like what? So watching how they work, watching how they write, how they record, that like changed me, you know, and similarly, like my first crossover was with Sting, where he had me fly to Paris to work on his song, and I'd never seen that kind of process. I'd made 3 classical albums at that point, and so it was just being thrown in at the deep end and learning how to approach music a different way. So I learned from these people. I got to watch how they make things, and so I can't pick favorites over in collaborations, but I really remember those early ones. There is a visibility that we can all clock, you know. When I was working earlier internationally, on the whole, I felt like I was working in a vacuum. You know, there just weren't a lot of us out there. A few notable classical artists, and that was kind of it. And then the diaspora globally would be flocking to the concerts of more of the film music artists. Whereas now, I think there's a lot of barriers that have been broken. So across fields, whether it's festivals we're talking about, or tours and concert halls, or award shows, there's a presence now that I think in the last few years has really shifted and is really positive. It feels like there's a greater understanding of the wider variety of music that's coming out from here than there used to be. The Indian diaspora occupies a very different position now than it used to. And I think that's made a big difference in what is considered viable commercially. And then once people take a chance on that, it has a ripple effect and crosses over past the diaspora and can reach a broader space. I think there's a lot of scope to use a wide range of music in Indian film. I think there's a lot of great music happening in Indian film. It's not that I don't, but there is scope to broaden the entire range and nuance of music that exists in Indian film. But it involves people taking a chance on that. And I think globally, this is not an India issue, but globally, the music field, the music industry, the film industry, everything's getting narrower. You know, the people who make the decisions in a financial way tend to go for the safest decisions they can because they feel like it's more guaranteed to give back what they invest. That's what it comes down to. Whether you're looking at Hollywood blockbusters and like the unending Marvel series that keeps on coming out, or people going for music that they've seen has been a hit in the past, so let's make something like that again. It's understandable, but there's an element of risk taking that needs to happen if you want to go broad. And I feel hopeful because Indian cinema has opened up so much anyway. If you look at the film that's being made, the content that's being made, it's really an exciting time, actually. There's a lot more room for different kinds of storytelling. And I think the ripple effect is that there will be a lot more room for the kind of music that supports that as well. But it does involve people taking that chance. So, you know, speaking from a personal perspective, I'll walk into like the Priyanka Chopra's Oscars party where within the space of 10 minutes, I had 9 people come up to me going, "Oh, I'm such a fan of your music. I was listening to it when I was writing my film." And I was like, "Oh, you should have called me." And they were like, here, almost more than everywhere else, is such a kind of viable part of the commercial aspect of a movie. You know, music becomes great hits. And so the idea of taking a risk on someone a bit more niche or perhaps not from the film industry, not known as a composer, that would feel scary to people. But ideally, that bravery would be nice for the right films, you know, because I think there is so much more being made that could be supported through a wide variety of music. That would be really cool.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.